My younger brother, Eric, slapped me at my son's birthday party, and my parents took his side. Years later, they came begging for help when he tried to steal their house, though it was actually mine. I'm a 35-year-old man, and Eric is 28. Growing up, the favoritism in our family was clear and painful. From the moment Eric was born, my parents treated him like a treasure that needed constant care, while I was just there. I'll never forget my 10th birthday. My parents canceled my party because Eric had a cold, not even a serious one, just a little cold. They couldn't let him feel left out. As we grew older, it only got worse. I was a straight-A student, captain of the debate team, and earned a partial scholarship thanks to my SAT scores, but my parents barely noticed. They were too busy praising Eric for passing his classes with C's and G's. Every parent-teacher meeting was the same. They ignored my achievements and focused on how to help Eric. At 18, I moved out, determined to succeed without their constant comparisons. I worked multiple jobs, paid my way through college, and earned a degree in computer science. Eventually, I landed a great job at a tech company. That's where I met my wife, Darla. She's kind, smart, and actually celebrates my successes. We've been married for 5 years and now have a 1-year-old son, James. Eric, on the other hand, never moved out. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester, saying it was too stressful. At 28, he still lives with our parents, spending his days playing video games and working part-time at a gaming store. My parents support him completely, paying for his food, bills, car insurance, and even gaming subscriptions. When I once suggested he should try a full-time job, my mom cried, saying I was being too harsh on her sensitive son. Last month, we hosted James's first birthday party at my parents' house. I didn't want to, but they insisted, saying it would mean a lot to Eric to be part of it. I gave in, hoping to keep the peace. The party started off fine. We decorated the backyard, and James was having fun. But during lunch, I accidentally bumped into Eric while holding my plate of food. Some pasta with marinara sauce spilled on his new limited edition gaming t-shirt. I immediately apologized and even offered to pay for dry cleaning or buy him a new shirt. I know gaming merchandise can be pricey. Instead of accepting my apology, Eric exploded. He started yelling about how I always ruin things for him. He even brought up stuff from when we were kids, blaming me for everything. Eric accused me of deliberately trying to hurt him, just like when I accidentally broke his gaming console when I was 12 and he was 5, or when I took the last slice of pizza at his 10th birthday party because I hadn't eaten all day while helping set it up. The whole room went silent as everyone stared at us. Before I could say anything, Eric slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the quiet room. My cheek hurt, but what hurt more was what happened next. My mom rushed over, not to check on me, but to fuss over Eric. She kept asking if his hand was okay from hitting me and if he needed ice. My dad just stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one at fault. I looked around the room. My wife stood frozen in shock, holding James, who had started crying from all the noise. Some guests avoided eye contact, while others whispered to each other. And there was Eric, being comforted by my mom while I stood there with a stinging cheek. When I finally spoke, I asked my parents if they were really okay with their son being slapped at his own child's birthday party. My mom's response? "You're older, you should know better. Look what you did to his new shirt. You know how much he loves his gaming merchandise. He saved for weeks to buy that." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. Years of bottled-up frustration came spilling out. I told them how they had enabled Eric's behavior his entire life, never holding him accountable or pushing him to improve. At 28, he was still living at home, playing video games, while I'd been working hard since I was 18. I reminded them how they skipped my college graduation because Eric had a gaming tournament that day, how they barely helped with my wedding because they were worried about Eric feeling left out, how they'd only visited James twice since he was born because Eric was uncomfortable around babies. My dad got angry and told me to leave if I couldn't respect my brother. So, I did just that. I picked up my son, told my wife we were leaving, and walked out. My mom started crying, not because I was leaving, but because look how upset Eric is now. Later that day, I started getting calls and messages. My parents said I needed to apologize to Eric. Apparently, he was so upset about his shirt that he locked himself in his room and wouldn't come out. Relatives called to say I should understand that Eric is sensitive and that spilling food on him was provoking him. Others said I was overreacting to just a little slap and that, as the older brother, I should be more understanding. I blocked everyone, my parents, Eric, and any relatives who defended him. Some family members who saw what happened at the party reached out to support me. They admitted they'd noticed how unfairly I was treated over the years, but had stayed quiet to avoid causing drama. Too little, too late. It's been a month since I cut contact. My wife fully supports my decision. She said she never wants James to think it's okay to hit people or to accept abuse just because it comes from family. Some relatives say I'm being too harsh and should forgive Eric because he's my brother, but I don't think being family means I have to tolerate abuse. Update 1. It's been 2 years since I went no contact with my family, and life has been peaceful without their drama. James is now 3, and we have a 6-month-old daughter, Emma. Both Darla and I got promotions at work, and we bought a bigger house. Life as a family of 4 has been wonderful. Last week, everything changed when I got a call from an unknown number. It was my mom, crying hysterically. At first, I couldn't understand what she was saying. When she calmed down, I was shocked. Eric had somehow transferred the house into his name and was selling it. He gave my parents 2 weeks to move out, and they had nowhere to go. But what shocked me more was what came next. The house was actually mine all along. When my grandfather passed away 15 years ago, he left the house to me in his will. I was 20, just starting college. My parents never told me about the inheritance because they had their own plans. They wanted Eric to have the house eventually. They thought they could convince me to sign it over to him when he was more stable. For 15 years, they lived in my house without telling me. For 15 years, they let Eric live there rent-free while I worked multiple jobs to afford my own place. For 15 years, they kept this secret, knowing I was struggling to save for my first home. My mom kept crying about how they never thought Eric would betray them like this. He'd started acting strange recently, talking about moving to another state with online gaming friends. He needed money for a gaming setup and streaming equipment, so he started asking questions about the house's ownership. They still wouldn't tell me exactly how Eric got the house in his name. My mom said he handled the paperwork while they were on vacation last month. Since I never signed any transfer documents, I can only assume he forged my signature. The irony is almost laughable. The parents who kicked me out of their house 2 years ago are now begging for my help because the house is actually mine. The brother who slapped me at my son's birthday party has now betrayed them by trying to steal my property. I decided to cut off contact with everyone, my parents, Eric, and the relatives who defended him. Some family members who were at the party later reached out to show support, saying they'd always noticed how unfairly I was treated but never spoke up to avoid drama. It was too little, too late. A month passed, and my wife completely supported my decision to go no contact. She said she didn't want James growing up thinking it's okay to hit people or accept abuse just because it comes from family. Some relatives told me I was being too harsh and should forgive Eric because he's my younger brother, but I didn't see why I should keep putting up with abuse just because we're related. Update 1. 2 years have passed since I went no contact with my family, and life has been peaceful without their drama. James is now 3, and we have a 6-month-old daughter, Emma. Darla and I both got promotions, bought a bigger house, and have been enjoying life as a family of 4. Last week, everything changed when I got a call from an unknown number. It was my mom, crying hysterically. At first, I couldn't make out what she was saying. When she calmed down enough to talk, I was shocked. Eric had somehow transferred the house into his name and was selling it. He gave my parents 2 weeks to move out, leaving them with nowhere to go. But what shocked me even more was what my mom said next. The house was actually mine all along. When my grandfather passed away 15 years ago, he left the house to me in his will. I was 20 and just starting college. My parents never told me because they had plans to give the house to Eric instead. They wanted to wait until he was more stable and then convince me to transfer it to him. For 15 years, they lived in my house without telling me. They let Eric live there rent-free while I worked hard, juggling multiple jobs to afford my own place. They watched me struggle to save for my first home, all while keeping this secret. My mom kept crying about how they never expected Eric to betray them. She said he'd been acting strange lately, talking about moving to another state with online gaming friends. He needed money for gaming equipment and started asking questions about the house's ownership. They wouldn't explain exactly how Eric got the house in his name. Mom just kept saying he handled the paperwork while they were on vacation last month. Since I never signed anything, I can only assume he forged my signature. The irony is almost laughable. The same parents who kicked me out of their house 2 years ago are now begging for my help because the house was actually mine. The same brother who slapped me at my son's birthday party has now betrayed them by trying to steal my property. My mom revealed how Eric had tricked them into transferring the house to his name. He told them it was just a formality for a gaming business he was starting and promised to take care of them once he became a successful streamer. They believed him because they wanted to think their son wouldn't betray them. After talking to Darla, I decided to let my parents stay in the house, but with conditions. They must pay rent. It's not market rate since they're on a fixed income, but enough to remind them they're living in my house. They must attend family therapy if they want a relationship with me or my kids. Eric is not allowed in the house without my explicit permission. Eric didn't take the eviction well. He sent threatening messages to me, my parents, and even Darla, blaming me for ruining his life and turning our parents against him. He demanded to move back in, claiming it was his home and he had nowhere else to go. I blocked his number and saved all the messages in case we need them later. Last I heard, Eric was couchsurfing at friends' houses. His plans to move in with his online gaming friends fell through when they realized he had no money. Some relatives suggested I help him because he's my brother, but I refused. He tried to steal my house, and as far as I'm concerned, he's no longer my brother. Update 3. The past 6 months have been interesting. My parents have been paying rent regularly and attending therapy. They're trying to rebuild our relationship, but it's a slow process. Therapy has revealed how their favoritism hurt both Eric and me in different ways. Mom admitted they started enabling Eric out of guilt. When he was born, they had financial struggles and couldn't give him the same privileges I had in early childhood. To make up for it, they overindulged him. What started as buying him extra toys turned into a lifetime of spoiling him. Dad broke down during therapy when he realized their actions created an entitled monster out of Eric while pushing me away. He admitted they always thought I would be fine because I was responsible and hardworking, so they focused all their attention on Eric, thinking he needed more help. Last month, Eric sent me a long email. He said he had started therapy and realized his mistakes. He hit rock bottom after being evicted. None of his gaming friends wanted to house him permanently, and his streaming career never took off. Eric said he's now working at a warehouse and sharing an apartment with 3 roommates. In the email, he apologized for everything, hitting me at James's birthday, forging my signature, and trying to steal the house. Therapy, he claimed, helped him understand how our parents' favoritism had warped his worldview. He asked if he could move back in with our parents and promised to pay rent this time. I declined his request. I forwarded Eric's email to my lawyer, who advised me to stay no contact given his history of manipulation and fraud. While the house was my inheritance, everything else in my life I earned through hard work. I refused to enable his behavior, even if he claims to have changed. Some relatives criticize me for charging rent to my elderly parents, saying family should help family for free. But this isn't about money, it's about consequences and boundaries. My parents hid my inheritance for 15 years, enabled Eric's abuse, and only apologized when they needed something from me. They're lucky I'm letting them stay at all. Mom still makes comments about Eric's struggles. Last week, she mentioned he couldn't afford his car payment and might lose his vehicle. I shut it down, reminding her that he's an adult who tried to steal my house. If they want to help him, they can, but not while living under my roof. Darla supports my decisions and suggested we could occasionally invite my parents over for dinner to see the grandchildren. James asks about his grandparents sometimes, so I'm considering it, but I'm not ready for regular family gatherings yet. The betrayal is still too fresh. For now, this arrangement works. My parents have a safe place to live, I have control over my property, and Eric is finally learning to face the consequences of his actions. I've realized that family relationships work better with clear boundaries and consequences. Being family doesn't mean letting people take advantage of you. It means holding each other accountable and respecting each other's limits.